It's 11 o'clock, so let's start this little press demo, and welcome everyone. So this is the second day, so I hope you've had a good show until now. We certainly have. So what we're about to show you here today is our brand new Rubikore series that we're extremely proud of revealing. So when we were here 2 years ago, we launched our flagship speaker, the Core, which was an immense, big project to really showcase our capabilities and also to take everything we've learned from the 40 years of existence to put us in the shape for the next 40 years. And we do have an ambition of being one of the premium loudspeaker brands in the world, and we really wanted to get technologies and experience to put us in that position. When we launched the Core, that was basically taking the exact same sound principles as any other Dali loudspeakers, but just unconstrained, and then see where it takes us. That was the result of the Core. And when we did it, we promised that the technology and learnings from the Core would find their way into other loudspeakers. And last year, when we were here launching another ultimate high-end loudspeaker, the Rubikore 11, that was the first result on that promise. Now, 2 years after, we are here with an upgrade of our Rubicon series, now called Rubikore. And what we're saying is that this is evolution through core technologies. So this is the second delivery on that promise, where we have taken basically what we liked from the Rubicon series and added the learnings and technologies from the Core to make a new exciting loudspeaker. Everything about the Rubikore, apart from its basic shape and overall topology, is new. All the drivers, crossovers, ports, everything is new, but the shape and sizes stays the same, because that was good. We had lots of response that in terms of format, the Rubicon was elegant, timeless, so that was what we had to evolve on. The range that we are launching consists of 5 models. We're going to play you the top model, the Rubikore 8. There's a little brother, the Rubikore 6, which is a smaller floor standing speaker, which is here by the entrance. Yeah. Then there's a compact bookshelf, the Rubikore 2. And then we have 2 other models. We have the Rubikore Cinema, which is an LCR speaker that is designed for being used both in landscape and portrait mode. So you can use it as center channel, but you can also use it as left and right speakers to get the best possible result in a home cinema. For us, it's very important for the customers, if you want to get the ultimate home cinema experience, that you use the same speakers on all 3 front channels. If you ask people, do you use a different left and right speaker in your stereo setup, everyone would say no. So why use a different center channel speaker? And I don't have to say more, because of course they should ideally be the same. And that, because the hybrid tweeter on that product is rotatable, you decide if you want to use it in landscape or portrait. At the same time, we also have an on-wall speaker, which is quite unique, but not many other brands have on-wall speakers that are actually premium hi-fi. It's a great speaker for stereo setups in flats in cities where you have limited shelf or floor space. It's great. It's also fantastic as rear and surround channels in a home cinema. So with those 5 models, we're covering a very wide variety of applications. But as I say, today we will play the Rubikore 8. So I will say a little bit about the background as I have, and then Thomas will be the DJ and also present the technologies. So let's start with some music, and yes. Because that's what people want to hear.
Yeah.
Right? And I'll take some coffee.
So, hi everybody. My name is Thomas Holm. I work with Christian. He's my boss. We work in the product department. and I'm going to play you some music today and also talk a little bit about all the new technologies we put into the speakers. But first off, I'll play you some Spanish guitar from a Danish guitarist, a guy called Rubikore. Very, very good musician. This should give you a good sense of the speakers, kind of the transparency of the system, but also the smoothness and the grand scale of the system. One of the things that we did, for example, with the bass ports and the bass drivers was to first off make a system that has lower turbulence, a much more linear response. We also added some magnets to the bass drivers so we get a better control of the drivers, and all those things, I'll come into that afterwards, gives us this kind of sense of ease and headroom to the system. So you should try and experience that on the first track here. We'll start off slowly, and I promise you we'll get loud at the end, like we always do. Okay, so 69. Here we go. So we'll try and put in as much different music as possible for the next 50 minutes. But you don't escape a Dali demo without a little bit of technology talk. So one of the most obvious things that we did for the, I'll remove these guys, that's better for our imaging. So one of the things we took from the core, that's the most obvious thing, you can see that on the front of the speaker, is this new cone shape that we have. We call this the clarity cone. And clarity is one of our sound design principles. What we mean about clarity is that if you want perfect clarity of a speaker system, you're going to have to get a seamless transition and the best timing between the drivers. And that's exactly what this new shape gives us. It actually helps the high frequency response of the mid-range to be more smooth. So when it transitions into the tweeter system, you don't hear that transition. They have the exact same smoothness and the same low coloration. So we like to use these red, you've seen these before, these red brownish paper and wood fiber cone drivers, or cones. And we like to use them for a few reasons. One of the reasons is we like to make amplifier friendly speakers. That's easy to drive for any amplifier. And when we have these cones that's extremely light, it makes it much easier for the amplifier to drive them back and forth. And that's just the special sauce of Dali cones, is that we have spent 40 years on perfecting this formula of getting the exact perfect stiffness ratio versus softness ratio versus dampening, so that this this cone has very low self-resonance, while at the same time being extremely light. Typically, low resonance is obtained by using a lot of dampening material, but dampening materials, they add weight to the driver, and adding weight to a driver or a cone, that creates losses, mechanical losses. And we have a philosophy of low loss speakers. So using these cones gives us a driver that's extremely agile but very well behaved at the same time. Very low self sound, so to speak. But any material has a self-resonance of some sort. And we analyzed those cones and found out that there was actually a little bit of improvement to be made. So by stamping out this shape into the cone, and then as you'll notice, that one is an uncoated cone, it's a little bit matte. This one is a little bit more glossy because we coat all of our cones with an acoustic glue, and just the perfect amount. But when we add this shape to it, when we coat the cone, some of that acoustic dampening will gather itself a little bit more in these crescents, in these shapes. And that means that these points, this 5-point shape, will have a little bit better dampening at those points than on the rest of the driver. And luckily enough, those points are where we see the most resonance on the driver. So it breaks up the standing waves on the driver. Yeah, I think that's about it. Let's see if we can showcase that a little bit.
You should.
Yeah. So the next track I'll play you is a Bob Dylan track, because I always try to sneak in some Bob Dylan when I do demonstrations. So this is the opening track from the Time Out of Mind album, produced by Daniel Lanois. If someone knows that guy, he's my personal hero. But it's the demo session from that album, so it's taken from the B-side. And what I like about his productions is that there's a lot of low-level detail, there's a lot of background detail. So it's not only what's been mixed into the front, but all those kinds of small things lying in the back. And you can only unveil those kinds of details if you have a system that's very transparent and has very low loss of information. So we'll see if that makes sense. This track is called Lovesick. Here we go. Come back to that. Take the tweet.
Take the tweet.
So I hope you noticed that the drummer and his whiskers and all that stuff was very behind in the background, but you can still feel the attack on his drums. It's not just a sound, you can actually feel the weight he puts into the sticks, and I love that stuff. Okay, one of the other obvious things that we updated, apart from the visual design on the baffle here, was the new hybrid tweeter for the Rubikore. What we learned from the core was that the what we call the Evo-K tweeter system, that was the first time we ever used a soft dome tweeter without ferrofluid oil in the magnet gap. Because you can imagine, if you want to put a voice coil into a magnet gap and move it back and forth 10,000 times a second at very low levels, if you then dump it into a bath of oil, that makes it a little bit more difficult to move precisely, right? Typically, speaker manufacturers like to use oil because it helps cool down the voice coil, but it also helps center the voice coil into the gap so that you don't have as many failures going out of the factory on your tweeters. This tweeter is a little bit more difficult and a little bit more expensive to produce, but by removing the oil, we can get the tweeter system to move completely free with no dampening effects of some of the shock absorbing things coming from the oil.
It is a viscous damping, but I think the main reason, or at least argument for putting oil in the gap, is that allegedly you should have a higher power handling, thermal power handling, but in reality it's actually a way for manufacturers to have a better yield, because oil helps center the coil in the gap, so you don't have to scrap as much. So it's very difficult to produce a tweeter without oil in the gap, but that's something we learned to perfect with the core and the Epicor, and now it's finding a way down here, because it is a better sounding tweeter if you can manage to do it without oil in the gap, because it's removing a loss. This is fundamental to everything we do, removing the losses, and you're left with only the good things.
Yeah. So you've seen this guy before, the hybrid tweeter. We're using two types of tweeters to perform one tweeter assignment. The soft dome tweeter handles everything from the mid-range and upwards to around 12 kilohertz, softly rolling off, and then the planar tweeter rolls in. full contribution around 14 kilohertz. The reason we do this is because we also have a principle of wide dispersion, which means that we optimize all of our speakers to have the best response off axis, 25, 30 degrees. Even you guys sitting 40, 50 degrees off axis will still have stereo image, so it works. But the reason we do that is because we want to have a more even, better coverage of energy in the entire room, so all of you get a good stereo image. And the planar tweeter is perfect for this purpose because this guy doesn't lose its dispersion when it goes upwards in frequency. The dome does, but before this one begins to narrow in and lose its dispersion, we roll this guy in and then we get the exact same wide dispersion all the way from 34,000 hertz down to the mid-range. So this is actually a tweeter because, you know, I've been going to concerts all my life. I don't think I can hear 14 kilohertz and upwards, but you can feel it. Same thing before. If you take it away, the stereo image narrows in and everything becomes more two-dimensional. When you put this guy in, it opens up and you can just feel that it's there. So we love this guy. And we that's also why we don't, you know, point our speakers into the listening position, because we don't have any problems with the dispersion narrowing in. So we don't have to point them in to compensate for that energy loss. And that's also why Dali stands for don't angle loudspeakers inwards. All right. So I'll try and showcase a little bit of the wide dispersion with a track with a very nice female singer. That's when you listen to it in the verse, it happens a lot in this area, and then the chorus comes in and it opens up, and you'll actually hear that the sound is extending to the sides and a little bit into the wall as well, because of the mix they've done. Okay, let me find the volume. I should have remembered these by now, Christian. Here we go.
Did you ever notice how I changed when you came too close? If you knew me now, 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 slowly, one step at a time, the one you used to know is not around tonight.
Okay. So now we talked about the most obvious things, the things that you can see on the front of the speaker. Now we're going to dive into the speaker. When we talk about losses in a speaker system, there's a lot of things in a driver that can prevent the free movement of the system. And well, the most obvious things is, for example, the rubber surround, the weight of the cone, the stiffness of the spider, the weight of the voice coil, all of those things. But actually the biggest contributor to losses in any speaker driver sits inside the magnet system. So the coil, you all know this, but goes into the magnet system like this and reacts to the signal. Pretty much any speaker driver in the world is using iron for the magnet parts, because iron is a very good magnetic conductor, so we get the movement that we want. But there's a big drawback of using iron, which is probably one of the biggest contributors to distortion in any speaker, is that because iron is also electrically conductive. And that means that when we begin to move the voice coil back and forth in this magnet gap, the voice coil will have magnetic fields around it, and those, because the iron is electrically conductive, they get induced into the iron and the energies get stolen. They actually create an opposing force that tries to prevent the movement of the driver. That's called eddy currents. Exactly the same thing that actually happens on your induction stove at home. So when you put the iron pot on top of the coils, the iron steals the energy and heats up the pot. We don't want that in a speaker system because that's a loss. We want all the energy to go into movement. So we had to figure out something to replace those iron parts and keep the magnetic properties. And we teamed up with a company in Denmark called Syntex that makes this soft magnetic composite, SMC. You might have heard that before. It's a granular iron powder where each of the grains, so to speak, is individually coated ceramically, so that when we take this powder and push it into or squeeze it into a form like a pole piece, none of the iron is actually touching each other, but it's still sitting so close that it's magnetic. So in this case, the one we use in the Rubikore is 10,000 times less electrically conductive than any iron material. That means all the braking effects, all the eddy currents, all the nasty third harmonic distortion that it produces, it's gone. So just to give you a number on that, if I took one of these drivers and put in iron instead of SMC, I would have 15 to 18 decibels higher third harmonic distortion at 1 kilohertz by using iron instead of SMC. So it really works. You can measure it and you can hear it. All those low-level details, that's because of this material. Yes, and
Demonstrate.
you might remember from physics class when you were kids, how if you took the magnet and put it into the coil, the needle began to move, right? You induced a current into the coil. Same thing happens in the speaker system. This is a copper tube. Let's say that's the voice coil. We'll twist it around this time. I'm keeping the voice coil still, and then I'm moving the magnet. But is copper magnetic? No, this is just a bit from a screwdriver, but this is just a metal part. Let's see if it's magnetic. It's not. It just falls right through. So, if it's not magnetic, it shouldn't have any effect on the magnet either. This is a small neodymium magnet. No effect as long as I hold it still. But if I begin to introduce movement, then something called Lenz's law gets introduced that begins to create eddy currents and an opposing force on the movement of the magnets. Let's see what happens. It gets slowed down. This is a very small magnet. If I up the ante and put a bigger magnet in,
And we want strong
powerful-
magnets in our loudspeakers.
Yeah, we want strong magnets in our speakers, right? Then it takes a long time, half a second or something, or half a minute. We have time today. So it breaks the movement that we want to be put into music. And that's a very big loss. And we have a patent on using SMC in speaker drivers. We also have a patent on using SMC in drivers' speakers for your head. So the IO12 headphones from last year is the first headphone in the world without any iron in the magnet system. And that's why it sounds so incredibly revealing and easy to listen to.
Yeah.
Okay, so using SMC, it helps the clarity of the system, it helps the openness, but it especially helps the timing. Starting and stopping the drivers makes it much easier for the amplifier to control the speaker drivers.
The driver's doing exactly what it's told by the
Yeah.
amplifier, rather than doing its own thing.
So I'll try and showcase that with a funk recording that has a little bit of punch to it, to see if we can start and stop the drivers a little bit more precisely on this one. So this is you might have heard this before. This is a track by George Duke called The Black Messiah.
Let's give this creative baptismal group a nice round of applause. Let's get underway. Ladies and gentlemen, George Duke, he's a Capricorn. And the quintet.
fairly loud. It's fairly a rough recording. It doesn't bite your ears off. It's still very smooth and extremely fast and all those things we like. All right. So you might have thought that this was a live recording because there was some clapping and all that stuff. It's actually, and he cheats a little bit. I researched it. It is a studio recording where they dubbed on a crowd afterwards. Yeah. But yeah,
Loudspeakers are not the only place
that's right.
in the speaker where you have magnet fields. And one of the things that we looked at from the core was like, okay, where else can we actually get use of the SMC material in the crossover components? So with the core and later with Epicor, we introduced SMC core inductors. Well, it says it all, that we're actually using SMC inside the inductance coil in the crossover component. And by doing so, typically for high value inductances, you use iron powder cores. By swapping that iron powder to SMC, we are lowering the current factor by a factor 4 inside the coil, and that's even before the signal hits the woofer. So that's significant because you don't just want to have great drivers, but the drivers also need to have the best conditions. So that's really, really important. So that's again a thing that is coming straight from the core and the Epicor. Same thing with the crossover components on the tweeter sections. They're the exact same high quality Mundorf capacitors that we introduced in core and Epicor, now finding their way into the Rubikore. Talking about tight bass control, in the Rubikore, we are also introducing double magnet bass systems, where we're adding an additional magnet, a bucking magnet to the back of the driver, which is basically helping to refocus some of that magnet field that would elsewise radiate around it, focusing it back into the voice coil gap, so lower loss. That actually means we have a better, more powerful and higher sensitive drive unit with much better control. The theme right now that I'm getting to is the bass control. So we've done the drivers to be as powerful as possible, but as low loss as possible. In the crossover, we're giving it its conditions to do its best job as possible. The third thing we're doing is that we're now introducing continuous flare bass reflex ports. Most people think of a bass reflex tube, oh, it's just a vent. It is actually a drive unit. When it's resonating, it is your transducer. And a straight port is a highly non-linear port, or a highly non-linear driver. So doing this continuous flare means that the port's behavior is much more linear, and the turbulence that is very audible has been significantly reduced. Again, what you're left with is just clean, controlled bass. I think Thomas wanted to demonstrate that. So powerful bass, inductors that reduces the distortion, and then new ports that is also reducing bass distortion.
We sometimes get carried away a little bit about the distortion torque, and it could sound like, you know, the best way to build a speaker is to have the lowest distortion possible. It's not the only thing in a speaker design. You can have all the low distortion in the world, but if you don't have good timing and good dispersion between the drivers, then it doesn't matter. But if you have low distortion to begin with and low loss to begin with, then it makes it much easier to get good timing between the drivers and a good overlap between the drivers. So it's a good starting point for us to make sure that we don't start out with distortion. Okay, so now that I didn't play you a live concert before, I'm going to play you one now. So the next track is by a German artist called Nils Frahm. You might have heard him. He's originally a classical pianist, and then he moved into a little bit more experimental stuff, building, you know, his own instruments, but around 10 years ago he lived in Copenhagen for a few years, and he slept on the couch in the apartment of Trendemøller and Michael Simpson. So he learned by those guys how to do electronical music. So this next piece is a track from his live concert. It's called Tripping with Nils Frahm. you can get this one actually. It sounds amazing, this album. You can also get it on Apple Movies in full surround sound, if you like that. If you have a home theater, I could recommend that. But we'll turn it up a bit and see if we can get some concert levels in here, and see if it makes sense what you said, Christian, about the tight, controlled, and low distortion bass performance. So this is Niels Fram.
So with all these new technologies, I mean, everything inside is new, but of course we also wanted to make them look modern and more fresh. So we got 4 finishes available: high gloss black, high gloss white. These ones we are showing here are the natural walnut, and then we have high gloss maroon finish here on the Rubikore 2, which is the first time we're doing a high gloss veneer in this segment. Of course, the speakers are manufactured in Denmark at our own factory. I think the next track that Thomas is going to play is going to show what's really the essence of Dali, is that we live in this non-perfect world. So if you take your records and your favorites, I mean, very few are perfect. So it's very important for us that the speakers are music and equipment agnostic. We don't want to judge your music taste, and we don't want to dictate the quality of source material you put onto it, and neither do we want to dictate what equipment you have to use to get something that sounds good. Basically, we want to make sure that your equipment and your music has the best possible conditions, because we can't guarantee that everyone is playing high-res files, everything. They gotta be able to play everything. I don't know, the next track, what are you saying? It's
we'll play the pop track first, and
pop
then
track.
we'll
And then we have
a bonus track.
We have a bonus track, but the pop track, what did you say? It's a way of playing Dire Straits without playing.
Actually playing Dire Straits at a show. Yeah. We have to buy the other guys beer if we play Dire Straits at the show. So, okay. So just you mentioned equipment, Christian. I just want to mention what we're playing on here. So this is the Masters series from NAD. We're using the M23 power amplifier, which is a 2 × 200 watts Eigentakt technology. It's a Danish technology as well. Pretty much the best you can get in Class D amplification these days. Very, very good amplifier. And then the brand new M66 streamer, DAC, preamp, room correction system, phono stage.
We're not using room correction in
No, it's just bypassed, going straight through. And we're using BlueOS to stream the music from this guy down into the amplifier to the speakers. The black box down here is an AudioQuest power conditioner. We're using power cables and signal cables from AudioQuest, but the speaker cables are our own. We make these exactly And a lot of people come in, especially at a show like this, and say, what are those cables and how expensive are they? And we said, we like to use them because it's the same cables we use inside the speakers that go straight to the amplifier. Makes sense. Right. Okay, so I'll play you something from John Mayer's new album. And it's not an audiophile recording. It actually sounds a little bit dusty, a little bit 70s-like, kind of Dire Straits. But this is something that, you know, regular people will slap on their system at home, and it has to sound good as well. So this is called Wild Blue. 70. Here we go. That's clearly not Mark Knopfler playing that guitar solo, but almost Dire Straits.
Sound is like that.
Yeah.
So that was basically the presentation of Rubikore. We launched them now, they were revealed yesterday. They'll be shipping starting beginning of June. These are priced at 3,500 euros a piece, the Rubikore 8. The little brother, the Rubikore 6, is 2,500 euros a piece. The Rubikore 2 is 1,300 euros a piece. Everything's new, I hope you liked it, but I think before we finish off completely, I think there's a bonus track, as Tom has talked about. We always have to have a bonus track.
Yes.
And then afterwards, if you have questions, please feel free. But let's start with the bonus track.
In my opinion, there's too many systems that can only play, you know, triangles and jazz trios and all that stuff. We like to have fun with hi-fi. It's supposed to be fun. So we always finish off with something that's a little bit more fun. This year it's also techno. So another artist this time. This group is called Starlight. Very nice track, if you like that genre. But so either you like it or we scare you away. Either way.
Yeah. But the session is ended, so we
Yeah,
don't care.
All right, here we go. protect your ears. You probably have a lot of stuff to listen to today as well. So yeah, that was the Rubikore 8.
I hope you like it. And of course, everything, the entire range is displayed next door. There's also a cut-through model of the Rubikore 2 where you can see the
That's the
insides of
biggest
it
one.
and
Yes, that's the
new technologies.
You make your own drive.
Everything is created in a factory in Denmark. Yes.
So, first of all, great demo, going through all the parts and the technology, even the port. Just about the cabinet, anything special? Is it MDF? Is it?
The cabinet is MDF, real wood veneer. Inside heavily braced. Also, the bracings are put non-parallel to make sure that we have no standing waves in there. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, great demo.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you.